Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, I'm going to be talking about Michael Bay's 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. Join me, won't you? So, set in the days leading up to September 11th, 2012, 13 Hours tells the true life story of 6 members of what's called the Annex Security Team, who are a group of ex-military contract workers, as they are forced to defend a US embassy in Benghazi, Libya, from attacking Islamic militants. And with the giving of that synopsis, so begins my film viewing experience for 2016. And this year begins the same as every year, with January and February, or as I like to affectionately call them, the dumping months for films that studios don't really know how to handle. And of course there are a wide variety of reasons for this, one of which is sometimes a studio will watch an earlier cut of a film and decide, wow, this film is really not coming together like we intended it to. And last year's Jupiter Ascending is a prime example of this, going from a July 18th, 2014 release to a February 6th, 2015 release, which I did find to be an unfortunately justified move, and it's also why any interest that I had in the upcoming Guy Ritchie King Arthur film has completely evaporated, as that film has been pushed from July 22nd of this year to February 17th of next. And though there are very obvious exceptions to this, there are other instances that the studio just doesn't deem the film to be popcorn enough for the summer season, scary enough for the fall season, or artsy enough for the winter season. But there are some instances where the studio very intentionally places a solid film in the months of January and February to capitalize on the lack of competition. So for example, last year's American Sniper got a wider release on January 16th and went on to make $350 million just at the domestic box office. And given their similarities, I thought perhaps that's what the studio was hoping to do with 13 Hours. Now, Michael Bay unashamedly crafts films that play to the same part of our brain that loves cotton candy, Big Macs, reality TV, saccharine love songs, and circus strongmen. And to be fair, I think he does have the ability anyways to do that exceptionally well. I mean, I would even say that The Rock is a great action film, Armageddon is a whole lot of fun, The Island is surprisingly cerebral, and the first Transformers is a masterpiece when held up to Transformers Age of Extinction. Nonetheless, where Bay's blinding flashiness, irreverent bravado, over-the-top hijinks, and kind of uncomfortable objectification of women can, at best, be laughed off during his over-the-top fictional films like Bad Boys or Transformers, I find it a whole lot more difficult to give him grace when he's tackling true-life events with the same techniques and tone. For instance, with Pearl Harbor, that style made war, which is brutal and terrible, kinda start looking cool and slick. Or with Pain and Gain, I found the decision to treat those disturbing and disgusting true-life events like they were a dark comedy to be extremely off-putting. In both instances, there was just such an extreme reduction in the facts, really just down to what was entertaining, sexy, or explosive. And I find it incredibly difficult to get past that when the people I'm watching on screen aren't supposed to be fictional. There was, however, one hope that I was holding on to for 13 Hours, holding on to with all my might. And that was, if there's any one thing that Michael Bay respects in his own unique Michael Bay sort of way, it is our US military. I mean, the reason he's been allowed to use so many of their vehicles, film on so many of their bases, and utilize so many of their actual servicemen and women in his past films is because they like the way they're represented in his films. Now, I will address how successful I thought Mr. Bay was at respectfully retelling this story, but let's dog-ear that for a moment and talk about a few of the other positives from 13 Hours. First off, I thought the acting was all very solid. I thought all the actors portraying soldiers in this film, in the way that they were just physically built, as well as how they moved and fought, very much convinced me that they were soldiers. I also thought that John Krasinski, for what he was given, turned in a very soulful performance and came the closest to providing a real understanding of these men. I'm also a huge fan of James Badge Dale. Everything he's been in, from The Lone Ranger to The Walk, regardless of what you thought of the film, he has crushed it, always providing believable characters, each with their own distinct quirks. Also, I was so pleased that the comedy on this film, by and large anyways, was not Bay's standard, ooh, let's just have the actors throw out as much unrestrained, unsculpted silliness as humanly possible. In addition to that, I really have to compliment his visual restraint. In a lot of instances, we didn't see the same old Bay that we've seen, who is just the king of throwing in cool shots for the sake of cool shots. Though there is a moment where he literally recycles the exact same tracking with the falling bomb shot that we saw in Pearl Harbor. And he can't seem to help but, in a couple moments anyways, bring in that thumping bass that just demands you chant along with it. This is manly. This is cool. This is manly. This is cool! Though, again, he did show some restraint, and I did appreciate the very conscious effort of trying to capture things in a less manipulative way than he has on films past. Something else that Bay can really struggle with is allowing his films to settle in certain moments, instead of just cutting together one long montage of sloppy chaos. And for me, the strongest moments on this film were the moments where he stopped, especially when he did so to force the characters and the audience to question, wow, I am surrounded right now by guys with guns, and I don't know if they're on my side or if they're about ready to kill me. As far as things that didn't work quite as well in this film, Mr. Bay couldn't cut a short film together if he wanted to. And actually, if you listen to interviews just prior to the release of Transformers 4, he doesn't want to do that. Where he unashamedly admitted that he makes long movies and has no intention of ever changing that. At the same time, though, he also admitted, with 13 Hours, that the more he cut out of the film, the more compelling and engaging it became. I just wish he could have listened to his own advice and cut out another 30 minutes. Also, as far as the action goes in this film, I really couldn't tell you most of the time what the heck was going on. How many teams there were, where they were in relation to one another, where their combatants were, which direction they were heading in, how far they were from their destination or how close they were to it, and no, not in an intentional fog of war kind of way. And though things do improve once our heroes have fortified an embassy to hold off their attackers, Bay's attempt at this frenetic documentary-style filmmaking is never quite as strong as a film like Saving Private Ryan. A film with incredibly chaotic and visceral action, where the internal logic and geography is never lost. Which I saw Bay, or maybe just his screenwriter Chuck Hogan, quite humorously recognizing in a couple of moments. And I say humorous because what those moments literally were was a character throwing a map down on a table, indicating where things were, how they were related to one another, and then bam, before we had any actual time to process or comprehend that information, we were yanked straight back into the action. Which in an interesting way is kind of how I would describe the appearance of subtlety, nuance, or any genuine understanding of the men around which this film revolves. And therein lies my greatest qualm with this film, because I have heard certain people kind of defend its simplistic presentation of these very complex events by saying things like, well, at least Bay avoided his over-the-top patriotic chest thumping. And to a certain extent, I do think that is true. I just think he did something far more subversive and potentially far more dangerous, which was to almost completely strip these real-life people of any level of three-dimensionality. And again, like the appearance of the maps, there were moments where we got to glimpse these people's souls, where we got a peek into what they were feeling, the conflict that was within them, and we felt their confusion over why they would leave their families time and again to return to these conflicts. And those are such important questions and ideas to wrestle with, which is why I was so bummed with how they were handled. Now, guys, I will tell you right now, I am not a lover of politics. I can almost see you guys clicking away from this video as we speak, and I don't blame you. But I am a lover of the human soul, and it crushes me on a daily basis when I look around me and I see people who just refuse to assess their own souls, or when they refuse to connect with and understand the souls of those around them. And on 13 Hours, it was more than the security team's point of view and actions being unnecessarily weakened by the filmmaker's two-dimensional straw man portrayal of contrary individuals like the CIA analyst or the station chief played by David Costabile, who was really only asked to play the spineless weasel note that we'd seen him play on Breaking Bad or in Lincoln. For me, it was actually the handling of these genuine heroes from this true-life story, and just their reduction as real-life humans, and their inflation as these Joseph Campbell-esque legends that did this story the greatest disservice. And though I'm only going to give 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi a 2.5 out of 5, guys, I would still personally recommend that you see it, because I think the way that Bay presents the world is so very similar to how so many in our nation see it, and understanding and recognizing that, I think, is very important. Now, I'm getting off the soapbox, so thank you so much for indulging me. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film, though, so please comment below. Let me know. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What worked for you? What didn't? Comment below and let me know. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you all to stay up to date on all of those things. But, for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.